We've got Jason Priester from allclemsontigers.com. We're still chatting, and let's turn our focus now to bowl season. I want to talk about two things. First, the ACC and bowl season, in particular, Florida State getting left out of the college football playoff. I'll tell you my opinion. You tell me where you agree or disagree. I think it's crazy that the criteria is the four best teams, and they're very explicit it's the four best teams, and they're very explicit it's not the four teams who earned it the most, that are the most deserving, who accomplished the most. That seems crazy to me that you're not basing, your admittance based on your performance, but actually how good you think they are. It seems like you can just ask Vegas. But as the rules are, I would pick Alabama to beat them 10 times out of 10. I think most people would. So if we're going with the four best teams, it's obvious to me that Florida State, without probably their best player, Jordan Travis, quarterback, at least their most important player, without him, they're not, to me, in consideration of a top four, probably not a top 10 team. I think they'll get walloped by Georgia. We'll see. Maybe Georgia won't be focused. But what are your thoughts on what happened to the ACC and Florida State in particular?
I'm kind of a little bit torn, man, because I hate to see an unbeaten Power 5 team get left out. But when we're talking about criteria, another criteria is explicitly says here, other relevant factors such as unavailability of key players or coaches that may have affected a team's performance during the season or likely will affect its postseason performance. As brutal as it is, if it was me and they're telling me I got to pick the four best, I'm probably leaving Florida State out if I'm being brutally honest. And that sucks, man, because they did everything asked of them. It almost makes it sound like you're saying, hey, man, you take one team, that team's no good without one player. And this is the ultimate team sport. So it just kind of feels wrong. But on it's for me, it's hard to justify putting them in without Jordan Travis, especially after what we saw against Louisville last night. That was just ugly. It was hard to watch. And I got hit a couple of times today. Well, what about Ohio State when Cardale Jones came in? He was the third string guy. Yeah, well, he lit up Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. I think he was 12 of 17 for almost 300 yards. He looked much better than Florida State's quarterback did last night. Than Glenn did. And again, I hate it. I think it sucks, but I think they got it right. I mean, it is what it is. I think this is the first time that they've had to deal with this much controversy, so few spots, for so many teams that you can make an argument for. Usually it tends to work itself out. This year it didn't. And ironically, in the last year of the 14 playoff, you wait till the last year for it not to work itself out. But I hate it for Florida State. I hate it for the ACC. But if you're asking me if they're better than those four teams, I can't say that they are.
Yeah. I basically feel the same way as you on this. I mean, I'll say two other things on this is for Clemson fans. Look, our rival, one of our chief rivals, got shafted, right? I'm not going to be upset about that, right? We're still going to the Gator Bowl. So some people were saying this is going to ruin our bowl. Look, maybe we would have went to the Holiday instead. It doesn't really make a big difference. And were you dying to go to the Holiday instead of the Gator? I can't imagine people just were dying to go to the Holiday Bowl. So it doesn't really hurt us aside from a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. I know we're talking hundreds of thousands when we talk about anything like this, but in the grand scheme of things, it's fine for Clemson. It hurts our chief rival. Let's not be mad about this. All right, let's change our focus. Let's talk about Clemson. Before we do, let me just remind folks, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. If you are a subscriber, thank you. I really appreciate it. Please like the video. And don't forget to follow us on X. Jason is at JP_Priester, and I'm just Ryan_Cantor. Jason, so Clemson is in the Gator Bowl instead of the Holiday Bowl. There was some talk, maybe we'd play LSU, maybe we'd play Oregon State was a thought at one point, which luckily fell apart because DJ's not even playing. USC, the real USC, Southern Cal, was another one they were talking about, but it's Kentucky, who Clemson has played quite a few times in the past. Kentucky is 7-5. They finished pretty bad though, 2-5 down the stretch. Louisville was their only bowl team that they beat on the entire season. They lost to South Carolina, which was their one ugly loss. Their other losses were Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Missouri. Your thoughts on the matchup?
Yeah, probably not the most sexy matchup. of what some of the ones we heard about. Otherwise, I mean, it's either Gator against Kentucky or the Holiday Bowl against who got in the Holiday Bowl? Utah? Was it Utah that got in the Holiday Bowl? Can't remember.
I'd have to go look now.
I can't remember for sure either, but because Oregon State didn't end up there either, and I never liked the thought of matching up with Oregon State because, especially after the news that DJ was transferring, because that was the only way to fit them two teams together, right? Lose your head coach, you're not in a Power 5 conference next year. I could see those guys leaving in mass and hitting the portal here in a week or so. So I was never very excited about that matchup. I would have liked for it to be an LSU or a rematch with Tennessee, but it's Kentucky. And I got to admit, I only got to watch them play one time this year. It was the game against South Carolina, and they did not look very good that night. That's for sure. I think Clemson needs to get a win in this ball game to kind of feel good about the way the season ended. If you end it with a loss, it kind of makes the 4-game winning streak kind of feel all for naught. So maybe matched up with Kentucky or is a little bit better for you than say if you're matched up against LSU. Again, I know it's not this big sexy matchup, but count me one of those guys that is happy we're going to Jacksonville and we're not going to California.
Yeah. So the Holiday Bowl is Southern Cal versus Louisville, just to close the loop on that. When Clemson, before Clemson really started making these changes, I was very concerned that Dabo was going to feel like, hey, 4-game win streak, we got it all solved. But now that that's out the window and they've taken kind of the deeper, thoughtful approach to really solving the problems, not just hoping they're glossed over, let's keep this momentum running. I was hoping let's get LSU, let's get a really tough team, and let's see if it's really fixed. Now they're actively fixing it, looking in the portal, getting great coaches. Let's ride some momentum. Let's have some excitement going into next year. So, got to remember, Clemson's, I don't know if Antonio Williams will be back or if they'll bother to play him. But Bo Collins is obviously not playing. That wide receiver core is going to be depleted. The offensive struggle. This could be another slog of a, 17-13 kind of game. So let's get out of the season with another win, look back at it and just remember that it was a 9-win season where they ended strong. And then let's roll into next season with a great coaching staff and some momentum. Looks like Jeremiah Trotter and Nate Wiggins have opted out. Any other opt-outs you're expecting? And then just let's end with hopes, obviously besides a win, but other hopes or things, positive developments you're hoping to see or hear about from the bowl game and bowl prep.
I'm not real sure who's going to opt out and who's not. It's going to be interesting to watch over the next week or so. I still think we're in for another transfer or two we probably weren't expecting, at least one maybe. I got asked a bunch about Antonio Williams last week. I just put it out. I've not heard a peep about him going anywhere. I even asked somebody and they laughed at me.
Thank goodness. That'd be a bad one to lose.
Yeah, I do think I could see one or maybe two more that we weren't expecting leaving. But I don't know anything for sure. But I'm with you. I think Clemson needs a win in this game. Again, it feels if you go down there and you lose to Kentucky, it kind of makes this November, kind of feel like it was all for nothing. And you want to go, like you say, you want to go into the offseason a bunch of momentum, because you have gotten off to a great start with this 2025 recruiting class, and we're fixing to get into January where we have junior days, and then you get guys on campus for spring practice. So it's a big stretch coming up in recruiting, and I think a win only helps you there, at least from an optics standpoint. I'm not saying one game, win or loss, has that much sway in guys' eyes. I'm talking about from an optics standpoint where the program stands at the moment. You see Dabo Swinney addressing some of these weaknesses on his coaching staff and knocking it out of the park with some of these hires. So, yeah, I do think this is a big game in that regard. So you need to go down there and win, whether it's ugly or not. An ugly win's better than a pretty loss any day of the week.
Yeah, I think there's just so much optimism with some of the deeper philosophical changes, plus the win streak. You kind of got different factions of the fan base excited for different reasons, but you bring them together now. Doesn't matter that it's Kentucky. End on the win with all that coming together. There's going to be a lot of excitement for next season. Jason, tell them where they can find your work before we get out of here.
Find me allclemsontigers.com. I'm always on Twitter at JP_Priester.
I appreciate your time, Jason. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, anytime, man. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.